Hello, good morning to all of you. Just a brief message to you that Diana stopped me. She's in the cafe and she has vegetable soup. So for those of us staying, if we want to have something to eat or take home, vegetable soup today. Hi, if I could have everybody's attention, I just saw Rabbi, he's coming in, and I just want to say, Caesar, can we, Caesar, I just want to make a brief announcement, and Susie and I, and now Helen, and a few of us have been very involved with developing what they call the Women's Pre-Passover. Hi, Rabbi, how are you? Oh, okay, I will. The Women's Pre-Passover celebration, and I think the last time we had it was 2 years ago, wasn't it? Or maybe even longer than that. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We encourage you all to attend, including men, if you'd like to come. And it's going to have an international flavor this year. And we're going to learn about Passover customs and traditions from various parts of the world. And here at Adat, we're very fortunate that we have families who come from all over the world, and they bring their customs with them. So it's going to be a new focus for us, and we're very happy that we have a lot of younger women that are involved from the ECC and the GLC. So it isn't just a sisterhood event. It's an event of the entire synagogue, the women of the synagogue. So we encourage you to sign up, and the announcement's gone out. And it's a beautiful announcement in pink and gorgeous colors. So please, if you haven't signed up, please come. Thank you. Good morning, Rabbi.
So we'll start Russia today, and then next week I have kind of I'm going to do two short ones. One of them on the island of Mauritius, which is one of the most beautiful islands in the world, and it's off the eastern coast of Africa, and I'm going to be there in 3 weeks. So I want to do, because it has a short history of some Jews, after fleeing World War II, they went there. And so I'm going to try to set up a tour so I can see the cemetery, and I think they have one synagogue on the island, so I'm going to see what I can do about setting up a tour to see those. Okay, so today we are starting Russia. Has anyone traveled there? So let's get a couple of personal experiences about Russia. Okay. Nobody's been to Russia? Okay, come tell us a little bit about your experiences seeing Russia.
Well, I wouldn't say I saw Russia, but we were in St. Petersburg for a few days, and it's interesting the pride of the tour guide when showing the sights. And then when my husband, and then in between the tour guide and the driver, they were speaking Russian. And when my husband got into the conversation, they were shocked that we know what they are talking about. And then they said, do you want to see the real, what we are going through? The tour guide was a university teacher, very hard living, she said. So from the ship, we went with the ship cruise, and so we took all the shampoo and whatever to give it to them. They were so happy. Then they show us, they went to a store where the lights were off until we entered to save energy. So if there are no Western customers, the light is off. So beautiful, beautiful. I mean, the Hermitage, and it all gold and all the treasures. However, the people were really, really depressed.
So we spent 4 days in St. Petersburg, and it was very, very interesting. The Great Art Museum, Petershof, Catherine's Palace, a great church, Orthodox churches, you know. And the other thing I want to remember is the dour nature of the people. I mean, usually you go to restaurants, usually you go to bazaars and cafes, and they're friendly and outgoing and cheerful. These people looked beaten down. And I'm talking about 10 years ago, you know? So, okay. You want me to repeat the whole thing?
Almost touch your lips.
Okay. So you want me to repeat the whole thing? Okay. So anyway, as I said, the palaces, Peterhof, which everybody has to see, the Great Art Museum, I forget what the name of it is. The Hermitage, which was very crowded, as you can imagine, in July. And I want to remember one more thing. As I said, the dour nature of the people. And I'm not trying to be prejudiced, you know, against Russians, but they were not a happy people, at least the people that I met in St. Petersburg. Okay?
Very good. Go ahead. When you come up to speak with the mic, try to have the mic like almost touching your lips. You can hear the difference. This is when I am very close, and this is when I'm very far. So you need to bring the mic up almost to your lips.
Thank you. Okay, so I was in Russia, Moscow and St. Petersburg. I think it was 1986. So it was just around the time of Glasnost, and we were stationed in Germany on an Air Force base, and the Air Force base had a travel office, and they offered tours to various parts of Europe, and one of the tours was to Russia. And this was for military who were stationed all over Europe, mostly Germany. So there were 44 people who were signed up to go on this trip to Russia, and we had an orientation meeting, and they told us, what to watch out for, what to do, what to not do. But when we applied for visas, only 14 were approved. So this was at the time of Glasnost, but apparently there was some incident that happened in Washington, D.C. with some Russian citizens. So I'm not quite sure what it was, but 30 people were denied visas to go to Russia. But luckily we went. It was at the time when you had to go through Intourist, and all of our meals were included, and they were all in the hotel that we were staying at. And actually, if we rode on the streets, I didn't see any restaurants. I mean, it was very, very, very different type of thing. When I would see, there would be grocery stands out on the street with long lines. This one sold cucumbers, this one sold tomatoes, this one. So in order to make a salad, you had to be online for hours because you had to go to each separate one. The Jewish experience we had in Moscow was incredible, and I'm trying to remember the details. Plus, the tour did not give us much free time. They didn't want us wandering about on our own. So we wanted to go to the synagogue, so we did have a little bit of time. We went to the synagogue, and it was closed, but there was a sign on the door which said the hours, but of course the sign was in Russian, and we couldn't tell because it listed, we couldn't tell what was Monday, what was Tuesday, because it was different hours. So an elderly man walked over, and he spoke Yiddish, and Marv spoke Yiddish. So Marv was able to determine from this elderly man what time the synagogue was open, and we decided we would come back later that afternoon when it was open. While that discussion was going on, a younger man came over, must have been in his 20s, and he saw that we were Americans, and in the discussion, the younger man spoke to the elderly man in Russian. The elderly man spoke to Marv in Yiddish, so this was like back and forth, back and forth. And the young man found out that Marv was a rabbi. And he said to the elderly man that he wanted to talk to the rabbi and have him help with learning English. So we said, okay. Well, when the elderly man left and we were talking to the younger man, he wasn't interested in learning English. He wanted us to go to somebody's apartment, they were refuseniks, and teach a lesson. And anything Jewish. They were interested in learning. So he took us on the subway to this person's apartment. By the time we got there, about a dozen people had gathered, and Marv taught them a lesson. I don't remember what the topic was. I do remember that they showed us pictures of their kids on Purim, because it apparently was not too long after it was in the summer, so they had Purim pictures. And we stayed there for about an hour teaching. They gave us cookies and tea. And then the young man who we met at the synagogue was taking us back to the synagogue in time for it to open. And he left us 2 blocks from the synagogue because he could not be seen escorting us into the synagogue. So we got to the synagogue. He got there later, but obviously went in separately. And when we went into the synagogue, people in the synagogue escorted us to the special seats for visitors. And so they sat us, it was up front on the side, and we got to participate in the late afternoon, I guess it was a Mincha Ma'ariv. It wasn't Ma'ariv yet, so it must have been just Mincha. And it was evident in the back row of the synagogue who the KGB were, that they were there. So it was a fascinating afternoon. And all of these people who we met had lost their jobs because they were refuseniks and had applied to leave to go to Israel. After Moscow was really kind of, as Gary said, people were dour, and it just wasn't a happy place. We took the train to St. Petersburg. In St. Petersburg, we went to the synagogue. We met the caretaker of the synagogue who let us in, and we had been careful about what we could bring and couldn't bring. I think we brought some kippot or something small that wouldn't attract attention. We couldn't bring books. And so when we got a tour of the synagogue in St. Petersburg. When we toured the rest of the city, it was similar to Moscow, that you didn't see restaurants. You went into the store, there were things in the window, but nothing inside. Like everybody, I had heard GUM department store in Moscow, and there was nothing in the GUM department store. It was just a couple of mannequins in the window, and go inside. There was hardly anything in there. So a few years ago, I was on a cruise that stopped in St. Petersburg. The difference in the atmosphere in St. Petersburg was incredible. I was not back in Moscow again, but just St. Petersburg. Things were lively. People were out on the street. They were riding bikes and skateboarding and roller skating, and in front of the Hermitage, and I mean, it was just such a different atmosphere in 30-something years. So it really the cruise ship offered a Jewish tour of St. Petersburg. So I went back to the synagogue. The same caretaker was not there, but apparently in the synagogue, the cantor was a close friend of our Alex Berkovich. You know cantor Alex Berkovich, who sometimes joins with Judy in services. And he gave us a little performance. He sang for us while we were there on the Jewish tour. And they had a lovely gift shop, and I bought a Kiddush cup. And I mean, it was just so different from the first time that I had gone. And it was like a different place. And now in Russia, there are restaurants and stores and things that are quite different from the first time that I went.
Wonderful, thank you. Alexander is younger guy, right?
Alex Berkovich, he's in it, probably in his 50s, I think.
I'm-
He did go to
AJR? Okay, good. He was like a year or two behind me in his studies. Yes. I know him pretty well. Yes. Do I have time for a couple of quick comments? Yes, of course. Except you have to talk into the mic. Hold on. Let me see what we. Okay, I need the long one, Lana, and then I'll come back to you. Right here.
When I was there, it was still the USSR. And a couple of things that stood out in my mind when I went to the Hermitage, and the paintings, everything was so magnificent. They had older women who were the guards sitting on a chair, and the sun, there were huge windows, and they had them open, and the sun was beating on these priceless paintings. Oh my God, like here, there, it's climate controlled throughout the art museums. So that was a big difference. And you were accosted by people to buy on the black market, in the elevators, everywhere. In the restaurants, do you want to buy caviar? And the waiter would open up a teapot and he'd have caviar for sale. It was such a difference to now. But it was a wonderful trip, and we went all through the USSR.
Thank you very much.
We didn't get our visa either. That's why we went with the cruise. But you need visa even from one city to another. Very difficult to travel there.
Okay, this is not a personal experience, but my daughter went to EULA in the 80s, and they had a mission to Russia, and one of the things they did was to bring things that were, quote, personal items so that they could give to the refuseniks so that they could sell these things or use them. One of the funny ones was, this is an all-girls tour, but they were bringing tefillin. They were their personal items so that they could smuggle them in, but as you know, most girls do not use tefillin, especially in an Orthodox day school. What? At EULA, yeah. Anyway, I thought that was fun. And I've wanted to go to on a cruise to the Baltics, and unfortunately, because of what's happening in Ukraine, there are no cruises to Russia.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you all. I think the personal experiences are so interesting. So let's begin with the early history of Russia, Jews in Russia. So apparently there is mention of Jews in Armenia and Georgia and in the Crimea starting in the 4th century. So that's the 300s, right? So what is happening in 300 CE? Constantine, very good. I just want to keep reinforcing this so that when you hear a number, you go, okay, I know approximately what's going on in history at that time. So 300 CE is Emperor Constantine, who himself converts to Christianity. His successor, Theodosius I, will make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. Constantine himself converts. And Jews are in Rome and live within the Roman Empire for sure, and there is persecution, clearly. And so Jews begin, as they had even much earlier, moving out to various regions. So it's not surprising that by 300 we find Jews in lots of different places. So you'll see the bottom here is Crimea. And of course, Crimea is in the news every day these days. We're going to talk briefly in a few moments about how Crimea changed hands. Jews can also be traced in Russia to between the 7th and the 14th centuries. There are various mentions of Jews. What we know for sure is that in the 11th and 12th century, Jews are restricted to separate quarters in Kiev. So this, again, should not be surprising to us. Jews are restricted to separate quarters everywhere in the Middle Ages, right? Ghettos in Venice, Rome, as well as other places where Jews are restricted and they couldn't move. In 1471, so 1400s, what's happening in the Jewish world in the 1400s? The Inquisition at the very end of the 1400s. So in the Golden Age in Spain is a little bit earlier. But what's going on in the 1400s in Europe is that the Polish nobility are asking Jews, enticing Jews, making it very welcoming for Jews to move eastward to Poland. This is a very, very important piece of information because it explains in large part why Poland had so many Jews, the most of any country in Europe. How did Poland get so many Jews? Starting in the 1400s, the Polish nobility asked Jews to go there. Why? Because Poland had an agricultural economy. The Jews from Western Europe were adept and acquainted with a mercantile economy. What's the difference between an agricultural and a mercantile economy? Zisel. Zisel.
No kidding. Boy, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. The difference is that money is a fuel of industry, and those who provide the money help the economy, and that's what was needed at a time where it was agrarian economy.
Very good, very good. So Poland had an agricultural society, and so things were grown in the country for the population of the country. A mercantile economy is based on trade, and the Polish nobility wanted what the West had. They looked at the West and said, oh, this is good. They are like modernizing, they're improving, their coffers are gaining more money. This is a good situation. We want what they have. How do we get that? Bring the Jews. They will help us get there. Yes, Cecil.
At that time in history was the ruler of Poland, King Boleslav, because I understand that King Boleslav, I don't know the era where he was a king, brought in Jews.
You know what? I don't know. Okay. I don't know. But I know that, but Poland had a number of nobles. And so remember that during the Middle Ages, almost everywhere in Europe was comprised of basically fiefdoms. In other words, a noble was in charge of a certain area, and there were many nobles. And Jews throughout Europe worked for the nobility. This is how they became ultimately tax collectors. Remember, we've talked about this, that Christians could not charge interest from other Christians. Why? It was against church law. It was what it was against what Christians called Old Testament law. It was against our scriptures. In our scriptures, it says a Jew cannot charge interest from another Jew. And remember that Christianity saw themselves as the new Israel. They have a new testament, which means a new agreement. We have our agreement that Moses made with God, and we ratified at the base of Mount Sinai. That was our agreement, is our agreement. Christianity brought a new agreement. And they said, well, God wants something else now. God wanted that then. Now God wants this. And recall that then Islam comes along many years later and says, we have an even newer agreement. God doesn't want the Christian covenant anymore, and he doesn't want the Jewish covenant anymore. He wants the Islamic covenant. And then the Baha'i came along and said, we have an even newer agreement. This is what God wants now. So it's called progressive revelation, that as you get later in time, God's will is revealed in a more accurate way. Our position from Jews has always been, Moses got the agreement, God got it right the first time, he didn't change his mind. That has been our position from day one. Okay, so the nobility bring the Jews to Eastern Europe in around the 1400. In 1471, we have mention of Jews in Moscow. That's going to be important soon because they're there for 300 years, 350 years, and then Catherine the Great takes the throne, Empress Catherine the Great. And she lives from 1729 to 1796. So I always remember Catherine the Great is 1800. 1750 is probably more precise, but 1800, Catherine the Great. Okay, that gets me, that's Catherine the Great on the east side, Napoleon on the west side, right? Catherine the Great died before Napoleon, but they're within they're within a short time period, so we can sort of like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on right now. And Catherine the Great presides over a period of time, reigns over a period of time when Poland is partitioned 3 times. There are 3 short wars between the Habsburg Empire, the Prussian Empire, the Habsburg Empire, which was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Prussian Empire, and the Russian Empire. And Poland is right in the middle of everything. And so Poland gets its territory divided up 3 times. And part of it goes to Russia, part of it goes to the Habsburg monarchy, and part of it goes to the Prussian Empire. And what happens is that Catherine the Great gets the eastern portion of Poland. And what she inherits then is one of the largest Jewish populations in Europe. She inherits lots and lots of Jews. And so she institutes in 1791, 5 years before her death, she institutes the Pale of Settlement. She restricts Jews to this area here. And you can see the Pale of Settlement if we look at countries now, it comprised some of Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, the Ukraine, and and what is today Crimea. And we have to talk about Crimea because that's a little bit problematic. But you can see that this area here, all the Jews that she inherits, plus any Jews who were living in Russia, get sent to the Pale of Settlement. And Jews were not allowed to live in Russia, Russia proper, in Russian territory, during the time of Catherine the Great. So the partitions happened in 1772, 1792, and 1795. So you can see, just by listening to that, 1772, 92, and 95, that the Jewish population of Poland went through 3 massive changes in a fairly short time. And I'm sure, Jews were like, well, where are we? Are we in Russia? Are we in Poland? Where are we? And I'm sure it was incredibly difficult. And then they are restricted to the Pale of Settlement. So now one thing we should know about the Pale of Settlement. This area here was not all Jewish. Absolutely not. It was a combination of a number of marginalized groups. Jews happened to be the largest of those groups, but there were lots of other people, other than Jews, who lived and were restricted to the Pale of Settlement. So we shouldn't just think, oh, that was Jewish territory. No. It was just a territory where lots of marginalized people lived, and all the Jews lived there too. Now, so Catherine the Great inherits this part of Poland. When else in history does this happen? So remember that Hitler invades Austria, and then he keeps moving east, and he eventually invades Poland. And so what happens when Hitler invades Poland?
Now he has a Jewish problem because there weren't that many Jews in Austria and Germany, but now he has a massive number of Jews.
Brava. So now Hitler has a huge problem as he sees it, of course. So up until the invasion of Poland, Germany had thought about a number of different ways to deal with Jews. The plan A was always make life so miserable they'll leave. Okay, that didn't work. Jews in Germany thought they were Germans first who happened to be Jewish. So they thought, this is going to pass, it'll be okay. Obviously, by Kristallnacht, that was like, oh my God, we were totally wrong here. We are in deep trouble. By then, all the routes out had been cut off. Okay, so other plans that were put forward was the Madagascar plan. The island of Madagascar off the coast of Africa is a very, very large island. And the plan was, well, we're just going to deport all the Jews to that island. The island was not big enough to take all the Jews in Europe. It was just not. Plus, at the time, Britain ruled the seas. The British Navy was very powerful on the seas. And so the idea of transporting Jews to Madagascar was wishful thinking, and it just fell through. So Hitler invades Poland. Now he has millions of Jews to deal with. And this is obviously when the final solution gets thought about. Because, okay, we can't get rid of them. We don't want them. Or we can't get rid of them by deporting them. We don't want them. What do we do with them? We'll kill them all. Okay. So Hitler has a similar situation to what Catherine the Great has when she annexes that partition of Poland. In 1827, we have Nicholas I on the throne. Nicholas I, not Nicholas and Alexandra, who are deposed in 1917. Nicholas I, that was Nicholas II. Nicholas I is on the throne between 1827 and 1856, and in 1827, and he institutes military conscription. Okay, I think we all are sort of kind of familiar with that Jewish males up till the age of 25 are conscripted for 25 years in the military. And every family had to supply a Jewish son. And we know from, perhaps some of you have relatives or ancestors who had to deal with this, that, Jewish families would do everything they could to keep their sons. They would cut off the right index finger, the trigger finger for a rifle. They would, the boys, they would hurt some of the legs so that the boy would be a little bit lame. They would do everything they could to not send their children into the military. That's why Janice's grandfathers left Russia. Yes. In Ukraine. It was an absolutely brutal policy. And if you think about it, this should bring up okay, that was done before. Nebuchadnezzar, remember, exiles the Jews from Jerusalem, and he brings them to Babylon. We have the Babylonian exile. Why did he do that? He took everybody who knew anything, who was educated, and he took them out of Jerusalem and he brought them to Babylon, where he could keep an eye on them. So who was left? Peasants. And so what did Nebuchadnezzar's plan? The peasants would intermarry with the indigenous remnants of the Canaanite population. They would become polytheistic, and they would never threaten Babylonian rule again. They would never rise up and revolt. And so what happens with Nicholas I is, if he takes all the Jewish young males for 25 years and indoctrinates them into Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Russian Orthodox Christianity, at some point there aren't going to be Jewish males growing up anymore, because these boys come back after 25 years. They have no connection at all whatsoever to Judaism. They knew nothing about it. And so who's going to be left in Russia? It's going to be Jewish women mostly. We don't have a lot of Jewish men anymore because they've been conscripted. We'll have a lot of Jewish women. What are they going to do? They have no choice. They're going to have to intermarry. And eventually Judaism's going to go away, and our problem's going to go away. So all these things have parallels in ancient history, in modern history. And so these are called the Cantonist policies. Does anyone know why? Cantonist. Zisel?
I think, not terribly sure, that it's a word from history. The origin of the word is canton, C-A-N-T-O-N, and is people who are forced in some place, but that's about all that I think.
Okay, very good, very good. That you're on the right track for sure. A canton is a district. an area where people live. And these were called Cantonist policies because they affected various districts of Jews. They would add to the various districts where they enforced conscription. But that's a word I want you to be familiar with. So if you ever hear it again, it's fairly common when we're talking about this time period, Cantonist policies. So in 1881, we have the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, who is the son of Nicholas I. So Nicholas I dies, his son, Alexander II, takes over. Alexander II was much friendlier to Jews than his father had been. And Alexander II, unfortunately, is assassinated in 1881. It is blamed on Jews. Jews did not participate. It's been very well documented that Jews were not in the mix. But it was blamed on Jews. And so starting in 1881, we have all kinds of persecutions, pogroms, riots against Jews. Alexander II, as I said, was slightly better to Jews. Jews could move out of the Pale of Settlement and into Russia proper, but if you wanted to move into Russia proper, you had to convert. You could, but you had to convert to Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And so you can imagine from approximately 1880 to 1920, huge amounts of Jews left because of the pogroms and the persecutions. Alexander II was, in some ways, called the liberator Tsar because he abolished serfdom. If you're a serf, what does that mean? And serf is like an indentured servant, like a slave. Yes, basically a slave. Tied to the land. Very good, yes. And he abolishes that. So he was seen by many as kind of a liberator Tsar. His brother, Alexander III, was virulently anti-Semitic. So he returns to terrible policies. Jews are expelled from Moscow in 1891. And so because of this huge immigration from 1880 to 1920, a number of policies were set up, the most important of which is the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924. The Johnson-Reed Immigration Act of 1924 severely restricts immigration from Eastern Europe. On the outside, it was meant to be against Southeast Asia. That was sort of the nice way of getting it to pass. But what it really did was stop Jews from coming to the United States. So remember that from 1880 to 1920, huge amounts of Jews from Eastern Europe left, and many came to the United States. And so many came to the United States that this act was instituted to stop it. In the same way that in 1939, so many Jews were leaving Europe because of World War II and trying to get to Palestine that the British institute the White Paper of 1939. And that severely restricts immigration to Palestine. They didn't want to upset the Arabs. England didn't want to upset the Arabs, the Muslim Arabs. So so they acquiesced and they instituted a stop on immigration to Palestine. Also, starting in 1880, 1881, you had many, many, many European Jews going to Palestine, right? They came to the United States, but many tried to go to Palestine. And these are what we call the waves of Aliyot. Right. And this is the beginning of the Aliyot that Jews were leaving, coming to Palestine. They wanted to build up Palestine. Remember, by this time in history, Zionism had been growing. The idea that the Jews deserved a homeland and that Palestine was our homeland. Theodor Herzl had already advanced this notion, and the idea of Zionism was growing. And so these Jews fled, wanting to help build up a Jewish homeland. Okay. Before the Russian Revolution of 1917, there were 300,000 Zionists in Russia. The Bund had approximately 33,000 members. What was the Bund?
To the best of my knowledge, the Bund was a Zionist socialist organization that tried to increase Aliyah to Israel.
Good. Zionist socialist institution. It was not religious. It was a secular institution. And in some ways, it was kind of like how we think of as unions. Okay? They fought for Jewish workers' rights, and they wanted to unite all the Jewish workers into a united socialist party. And it was dissolved into communism in 1921. But for a while it was very powerful, and powerful being what's the word? Relative. Thank you very much. A relative term in terms of Jews. But there was an organization that fought for Jewish workers' rights. And remember, and I'll finish up here today. I cannot believe this class goes so fast. You ask such great questions and have such great comments. It just like flies by. So remember that socialism was very attractive to Jews. They were at the lowest rung. Socialism said everybody gets the same amount. And Jews said, well, we're way down here. We like that higher amount that everyone's going to get, so let's go for that. And my final comment today is again, I will just give you my personal opinion, and you can make the decisions for yourself. So we have in Russia, especially during the USSR, you had a communist and socialist regime. And as many have pointed out, it sounds wonderful. Everyone has the same. But in reality, pretty much everywhere where we have totally socialist or communist regimes, the people are not so happy. It's not such a great thing. It sounds great, but it ends up not being a great thing. And here in the United States, what we already have is primarily capitalism with some socialist institutions, which we all like. Public schools, garbage collection, the VA. There are a number of socialist institutions that we have here in the United States that we all like very much. We love the fact that we can go out and start our own business if we want. But we're also very happy with the fact that our roads get paved and or that our garbage is collected, these kinds of things. The only reason I bring that up again is because you hear all the time over the news, oh, socialism, 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 it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible, he's a socialist, blah, blah, blah. It's like, guys, get educated. we already have some socialism here in the United States, and we love it. A little bit. A little bit. A little bit. We like a little bit. And it complements our capitalism here in the United States. Okay, everyone, have a beautiful week, and I'll see you next week.
So we also, our tour group, which was interdenominational,
Yes.
we had a tour of the Jewish synagogue in St. Petersburg.
Oh,
met
beautiful.
the rabbi and met the cantor.
Beautiful.
And he sang and performed for us.
Oh, nice.
And all the Christians who were in our group loved it. They were thrilled by it. You know?
Wonderful.
Huh?
Wonderful. Yes, sir.
In our history in the States, when the idea of Social Security had a fight between the conservatives and the ones that wanted Social Security. Of course. Social Security won.
Now everybody loves it.
Right.
be a thing now. Hello, Bridget.
Hi, Rabbi Alexander. I just have to tell you that I have to leave about 11:30. It's the
Okay.
only time I could get with my tax accountant, so that's...
Understood. Understood.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
So,
It's great to see you though.
thank you. It's a pleasure. Janice, I got your message. I got your email. Things are, I'm filling in a lot of things for Rabbi Schuldenbach, so I'll have to get back to you. So what did they say? Did you find the place? Are you going to the villages? Oh, I don't know that one. Did you go to look at it yet? And you liked it? It's the closest one. It's your home base, yeah. I'm gonna have to start it, but, yeah, I'm glad that you found someplace. I didn't even know about that place. I'll have to learn some more. Good morning, yeah, still morning. Good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. Obviously, I am once again not Rabbi Schuldenfrei, but Rabbi Schuldenfrei, unfortunately, this morning has to officiate at a funeral, which is why he isn't here. And oh, thank you. I really do appreciate that. So this morning, before we say our blessing, good morning to all those at home, whoever you are. I can't see you, but you can see us, so that's good. It's very, very nice to be together. I'll explain what we're going to do today after we do the blessing, even though I just said I would do it before we do the blessing. Changed my mind. Let's do the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. May we immerse ourselves, may we soak ourselves constantly in continued learning and continued joy. I just saw Rita go by. Where did she go? Okay. I shouldn't have asked. So, in a few weeks, we are going to celebrate Pesach. And I didn't have much time to be able to much notice, to be able to, last week, I prepared a whole new set of texts. I had a little bit more time to do it, not in this case. However, I found something that I hope will be interesting for you, amongst things that I've already put together, which is linked to Pesach in the fact that on Pesach we do numerous things with the number 4, but the one we're going to focus on today is one associated with drinking 4 cups of wine. So all the texts that we're going to do today are about imbibing in things, it is possible, honestly, I have to be honest, it is possible that a few of you have done these texts with me before, because as I said, I had to go look for something I thought was interesting and cool, but I don't know if anybody has heard them before. But the reason I feel okay about it is that I read them and I didn't remember what I put down from the Gemara. So I'm assuming that even if we have heard some of these before, it'll seem just like something we've never heard before. So here it is. We're going to get started. And of course, we'll have different people read. And I think that you're going to find these texts fun and quirky and interesting, I hope. So, does anybody want to help me distribute this? Thank you. Thank you. Oh, what a cute idea. That's an absolutely adorable idea, even though it's grape juice and not wine or beer. But what a sweet idea. Huh? Symbolic. Okay, folks, just wait a minute, please. The first one we are going to do is from Brachot 44a. Who would like to begin to read? Shirley. What? This is Talmud Bavli. All of this is the Babylonian Talmud, not the Jerusalem Talmud today.
Okay. The Gemara asks, and is there a circumstance where salted food is primarily and bread is secondary?
Okay, why are they asking this question? Don't go on yet. What is the basis of food in Jewish tradition? Bread and? Meat. Not in this case. Oh, I thought salted. Okay. Bread and salt. Where do we see bread and salt coming up?
Dip in salt water.
Yeah, on Shabbat, and it comes from a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons for Shabbat has to do with the destruction of the temple, and we also deal with salt for sadness. But salt and bread, we dip our parsley in salt water for tears. Let me finish my sentence, Janice, and then I'll call on you. But it's also considered to be, those are staple experiences in food. Now, there is a tradition. What is a tradition where you use bread and salt? And then we'll go to Janice, and then we'll go back to Shirley. What? Exactly. So there is this tradition. It is now a tradition that has spanned a number of cultures, but it starts with us of when you move into a new place in order to show that your place should be filled with the capacity for good and solid things, that you bring bread and salt. I have to go to Janice first, then I'll get you Cecil. So Janice's family, when she moved in with her family of origin or her own house and moved to a new place, they had to have bread and salt. Cecil?
Yes, I'd like to point out that the importance of salt is beyond Judaism. In ancient times, salt was deficient for humans and it was of a great value. Therefore, it was incorporated in our tradition of something of great value, salt. And the salary comes, the Latin word salarium, and that's people were paid in salt back then.
Thank you. Back to you. And now, back to you, Shirley.
All right. Generally, no meal has a salted food item as its primary component. Rav Ahai, son of Rav Avira, said that Rav Ashi said this halacha was taught with regard to those who eat fruits of Genosar.
That's where we're headed, the fruits of Genosar. Go ahead.
Which are extremely sweet and which would be eaten along with salted foods in order to temper the sweetness.
Okay, so now we start out with the discussion in the Gemara about salted food. We now move to this particular fruit of Genosar, which tastes better when it has salt added, and because it's too sweet. There are other fruits like that. In thank you. Watermelon sometimes has salt. My father salted all melons every time Your father salted all melons. Okay, so now we're going to keep our eye on that fruit of Genosar. Go on.
They would eat bread along with those salted foods.
On a related note,
Nope.
go on.
The Gemara employs hyperbole in praising the fruits of Genosar. Rabba Bar Hana said, when we would go after Rabbi Yohanan to eat fruits of Genosar, when we were 100 people together, each and every one of us would bring him 10 fruits. And when we were 10 people together, each and every one of us would bring him 100 fruits. And every 100 of the fruits would require a basket of 3 seah to hold them.
Okay, stop right there, and thank you. You're welcome. So we've got Rabbi Yochanan, remember Rabbi Yochanan? Of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish fame. Rabbi Yochanan, who always thought he was the most gorgeous guy on the face of the earth. That one. So anyway, what we have here is when students went to visit Rabbi Yochanan, what did they bring? The fruit of Genosar. He required the same amount of fruit no matter how many people were coming, right? So if there were 100 people, how many fruits did they have to bring? 10. And if there were 10 people, how many fruits did they need to bring? Back at you? 100. So obviously, Rabbi Yochanan really wants that fruit. One might even call it an obsession. And other people might call it an addiction. So let's go on. Okay. So go ahead. Who's going to read now? Joette.
Rabbi Yochanan would eat them all and was prepared to swear that he had not tasted any food. The Gemara asks, does it enter your mind that he claimed that he had not tasted any food? Rather, say that he had not tasted any sustenance. Due to their delicious taste, he was still not satiated.
Okay, so he goes, and he eats all of this fruit, and somehow, is it enough? It is not enough. So, go on. I'm sorry.
The Gemara continues to wax hyperbolic. Rabbi Abahu ate fruits of Gennesar until the sweet, lush fruits made his skin so slippery that a fly would slip from his forehead. And Rav Ami and Rav Asi would eat them until their hair fell out. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish would eat them until he became confused. And then Rabbi Yochanan would tell the household of the Nasi about his condition, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya would send the authorities after him, and they would take him to his house.
So, you got all these famous guys. They all have funny things happen to them when they eat this fruit of Gennesar. Finally, the Nasi, the head scholar, Yehuda Hanasi, would come and do what? Would send the authorities after him and what? Send him to the house. So why did they need to hire a cab to take Rabbi Yochanan home from?
He was stoned.
He was completely stoned. Stoned. So now we get, so that is the end of that story. So one of the things that's really wonderful, in my opinion, about Gemara is that we see these people, and these people are amazing scholars, and they're responsible for creating law and tradition that we still uphold today and that we still learn from today all the time. And yet, nobody erases all of this stuff. It's still there. So what do we learn about these wonderful scholars when we learn that they are amazingly famous scholars and you gotta schlep them home because they're so wiped from whatever it is they're tasting? What's the learning experience in that? They're still human. And right, so they're still human, and in that humanity comes some vices or some things that they fall back, from their stature. But who else does that happen to? Everybody. We all have something that even whatever it is, eating a lot of food, right? I think that's what you're trying to say, right? Okay, whatever it is, this is what humanity is, and so they don't hesitate to tell us. So now, so any questions or comments about this?
No, but I want to know, can you tell me exactly what is Gemara? You keep saying that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. When we first did our texts it was so long ago, who can remember? So we have Mishnah, right? Mishnah are the first rabbinic writings, 1st century, 2nd century, common era. Then we have Talmud, which is built on the Mishnah, and it goes from 2nd century all the way to 6th century almost. And then when you put those together, Mishnah and Talmud is Gemara. Yes, so that's what it is. Yeah, but that's not where we're. Yeah. So, what Cecil was trying to say is that Gemara has a lot of commentaries on the side of the page. There, Rashi, for example, who's France in the 12th century, and there are others. And then Rashi's grandsons are in the margin as well, and other commentators. Okay, so we're not going that direction, Cecil. Okay, so what we have, I have no idea what this fruit of Genosar is. It's probably a good thing that we don't know. So, but whatever it is, that's the story. It's a kind of a cute story, right? So now let's go on to Megillah 7b. You might remember this text. So who would like to read this text? Thank you. You can read another time. We got many more.
Oh, no, I've been moving around here. Okay, Rabbah said, a person is obligated to become intoxicated with wine on Purim until he is so intoxicated that he does not know how to distinguish between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordecai.
So we all know that tradition, right? The tradition of the fact that you're supposed to imbibe alcohol with this idea that you should get to the point where you just don't know the difference. That this is the text it comes from. So, and the Rava is one of the rabbis of the Talmud. So go on.
The Gemara relates that Rabbah and Rabbi Zerah prepared a Purim feast with each other, and they became intoxicated to the point that Rabbah arose and slaughtered Rabbi Zerah.
There you go.
Oh, my God.
Okay. That's worse than having to be schlepped home by the proverbial Talmudic generation taxi cab. In this particular thing, it says that Rabbah, his friend and colleague that he's drinking with, he gets so verschnookered that he takes
kills
a
him.
life.
Yeah, okay, well, maybe not. The next day, when he became sober and realized what he had done, Rabbah asked God for mercy and revived him. So he came back to life.
Okay, so he doesn't really die. Somehow God takes mercy on Rabbah, and he's allowed to bring Rabbi Zerah back to life. Either that, I mean, this is a great story on its own, but either that or Rabbah was so darn drunk that he passed out and he thought he had killed Rabbi Zerah, and he didn't really kill Rabbi Zerah. But the first text is better. So go on.
The next year, Rabbah said to Rabbi Zerah, "Let the master come and let us prepare the Purim feast with each other." He said to him, "Miracles do not happen each and every hour, and I do not want to undergo that experience again." So he didn't want to get slaughtered again, I guess.
So it's really funny because these guys are friends, but this last partying that they did took a turn for the worse, and he's saying, "Love you, pal, but no." Not. Go ahead. Wait, Shirley.
What is the difference between Rabbah is not a rabbi? What is Rabbah? Rabbah, is that a name? Or you have Rabbah and
That's
rabbi?
the name that he went by. Everybody had some...
Oh, what is the difference? I wanted to know Rabbah and
Or
rabbi.
Rav, yeah.
No, Rabbah.
These different rabbis were known by different names. If they were very, very well known and respected, they could just go by Rav, for example, and people would know who they were. So this is Rava, and he's it's talking about his. That's the only name I know him by.
Oh, is he a rabbi?
Yes. All right. Anybody want to make a comment on this crazy, fun Megillah story? You've heard it before, right? Oh, okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. Some of you haven't heard it yet. Anybody have a comment about this? We have our own resurrection here now. Our own resurrection. Right. Yeah, Purim and Easter, different resurrection. So, yes. Go, Nadia.
I like that idea that we are not allowed to rely on miracles. That's why they said, that's enough.
So basically what Nadia is saying is that God says, I'll do it for you once. Don't look to me to do anything anymore. So however that happened, it is a message. What is the message that the Gemara is saying for all of us? Because the rule is get yourself very tipsy on Purim. So what are they trying to tell us? Don't overdo it is probably just the best and most simple way to say it. There are lessons in this. There are lessons in this for all of us. Hi, Rita. I'm really happy you're here. I'm happy everybody's here, but I'm really happy you're here because I saw you walking out the other way, and I went, oh, darn, Rita's not going to be in the class. And here you are. So, okay. So let's go now to Psachim. Would somebody, oh, here we go.
It wasn't that I wanted to read, but okay.
I want you to read.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, Rabbi. Once again, we did not have wine, and we brought him beer. Rav Huna raised a dilemma before Rav Chisda.
Yes.
What is the halacha with regard to whether it is permitted to recite Kiddush over date beer?
Okay, stop for a second. Stop for a second. There were times in their community that one type of resource wasn't available as much. So in this particular text in Psachim, they didn't have wine. And everybody was used to making Kiddush over wine. And they didn't really have grape juice at the time. They had to let things ferment because things would go bad if they didn't let them ferment. But beer is also fermented, correct? So what do we have? Can you recite Kiddush over what kind of beer? Date beer. Why?
It's a fruit.
It's a fruit. Like a grape is a fruit, a date is a fruit. What would you like to say?
It's not the fruit of the vine.
It is not the fruit of the vine. Very interesting. So can you still say Kiddush over it? You can say Kiddush, but we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Okay, go on.
He said, now, if with regard to barley beer, fig beer, and beer produced from berries, I raised a dilemma before Rav as to whether or not they may be used for Kiddush. And Rav had previously raised this dilemma before Rabbi Hia, and Rabbi Hia had inquired of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and he did not resolve it for him, as he could not find a source that clearly permits it.
Okay, what I want to point out about this is we usually don't see this in Talmud or any Jewish legal texts, which is look, all these guys, we just read their names over the last couple of minutes. These are stars. These are religious stars. But what we have there is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who I said was head honcho at the time, he actually has to say, I really don't know. He was a superstar, dude. So he doesn't know. They're asking a question that even the highest of the high people in Jewish knowledge didn't know. And this is another thing that I love about this text before we move on. What I love about the text is what we learn from these guys. We learn the bad stuff, we learn the good stuff, we learn that they admit when they don't necessarily know something. It's really important as a guideline through centuries, through millennia of Jewish life. Unfortunately, we always experience some people who are in leadership in Jewish community or in leadership in general, who think they know everything. But these guys are saying, and they're all there, they're all the top echelon, and they're all there and they're saying, I don't know. Mm-hmm. What kind of text would they look for? Something in the Mishnah, something in the Torah, something to be able to reinforce it. If they can't find it and it's a necessity in the society, they're the next level. So then they have to try and put things together as much as they can in order to be able to make a decision. Let's see what else happens. You can read like that, that's
okay.
fine.
Is it necessary to say that date beer, which is inferior to those types of beer, those other types of beer, may not be used for Kiddush? The Gemara relates that Levi sent Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi a beer of 13 soakings, i.e., 13 batches of dates had been soaked in water until it had thoroughly absorbed the taste of the dates. This was considered a high-quality beer. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi tasted it, and it was especially pleasant. He said, "A beer like this is fit to recite Kiddush over and to say upon it all the songs and praises in the world, as it is as good as wine."
Okay, so how does he make this decision?
It tastes good.
It's high quality, it's clearly made very well, and it tastes great, just as great as wine. Now, what you said was absolutely correct. When you're saying Kiddush and you don't have wine, so it's not fruit of the vine, you have to say a different
Kiddush.
bracha. So you would have to say borei pri ha'etz, something that comes from the fruit of the tree, or if it's something else, you would say a different blessing. So, but what you learn from that is if you're ever having a Friday night Kiddush at your house, and you look in the refrigerator and you go, whoops, don't have any wine, don't have any grape juice. You can substitute beer if you got a beer. You can substitute an alcoholic beverage if you've got, you can also substitute scotch if you've got scotch. But you can't say borei pri hagafen. You have to say, if it's a fruit, you have to say borei pri ha'etz. If it's not, you can say shehakol. This is about everything. Shehakol, yes.
You can even make Kiddush over the bread.
And you can even make Kiddush over the bread. Thank you, Joette. No, because we use grape juice. You could use a juice. You could use a juice.
Actually, this is a question for you. What happens when you have rum that comes from sugar cane?
When you have rum that comes from sugar cane?
Yeah, that's what it comes from.
Probably shehakol.
Okay.
Sorry. Cecil just asked, what if you use rum and it comes from sugar cane? He's getting creative now. So I believe that if you had something that had rum or it was made of a sugar base, it would be shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro. So it's includes everything bracha. Okay, but now we're going to go to the next part of this. Somebody want to read at night?
I'm happy to give this to somebody else.
Okay, I'll read it. At night, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, remember that guy? At night, it disrupted his digestion and caused him pain. He said, It pains on the one hand and soothes on the other. Well, because he liked the taste, but he didn't like what it did to his tummy. With regard to the discomfort caused by beer, the Gemara cites related statements of the Amoraim. Okay, Tanaim were the first generation of rabbis who were involved in the creation of the Talmud. Amoraim are a next generation, so they're not the first generation, they're the next generation of Talmudic scholars. So, with regard to the discomfort caused by beer, the Gemara cites related statements. Rav Yosef said, I will take a vow in public which cannot be nullified that I will not drink beer due to its negative effects, despite the fact that beer was a popular beverage in Babylonia. So basically, Mr. Tummy Ache Rav Yosef says, I'm never drinking beer, no matter what. But everybody in Babylonia drank beer. Why did they drink beer? This is not just a Jewish question. They grew wheat. They had the means to do it. What other reason did people make beer? You're close, so you got it.
Okay. I'm taking a guess at this. Beer and wine and other alcoholic drinks don't go bad. And when water is not available, it's a safe thing to drink.
Exactly. People couldn't really drink water. I mean, that went on until what? Like the late 1800s in certain communities, and it's probably the case now. So they couldn't drink water, so they had to ferment things. They fermented all sorts of beverages, more of them and different ones in the Middle Ages, but wine and beer were what most people drank to take in liquids all the time. So, okay. The Gemara relates that Rav was found by Rav Huna reciting Kiddush over beer. So now we get to the crux. Rav, now is he a head honcho? Because all he goes by is Rav. So Rav is, Rav was found saying Kiddush over beer. So that might let somebody know if Rav is doing it, then it's A-okay. So Rav Huna says to him, Abba, and look at what it says there. Finally, you see it. Abba is Rav's first name. So he gets to be Rabbi and Daddy. Those are his names. What? Yeah, father. Has started to acquire coins with beer. So what does Rav Huna say about Rav? Come on. Yeah. Rav happens to have, look, all these rabbis had businesses on the side. They all had to. They all were doing something. They were doing wine. They were growing crops. They had shops. They did all this rabbinic stuff. I know we've talked about it. Basically, at night on the side, they had to have careers, a day job. So what is Rav doing? He's making beer. So isn't it a question about whether it was okay for Rav to say Kiddush on beer, thereby starting a precedent that everybody should buy beer because you can say Kiddush on it. So Rav Huna basically outs Rav about this. Some of the rabbis had breweries, yes. Different kinds of. Pardon? Now? It's an interesting thing now. I mean, I'm going to defer for 1 minute. I have a poster that I put up in my sukkah every year, And it shows a number of different Talmudic rabbis. It's a really cute poster, and what they did for a living. I got it from United Synagogue years ago. And I put it up there because the Gemara says you're supposed to have a career. But we live in a generation, and we've lived in a generation, Jewish generation, for quite a while, that there are a number of people who think that their job is to study. When the greatest people of our entire people, all the way through history, they had to have day jobs. They had to be doing something real in the society, and then they did their rabbinic work. So the reason that we have a generation of people who think that their whole job is studying, with which I disagree, but it's not up to me to decide, is because they look at the Jewish world and they say, the Jewish world is so screwed up, we need to have somebody who studies and prays to look after everybody. Which is why in Israel right now, when everybody's kid or themselves are going to the army, we have a whole body of people in the state of Israel who don't go into the army at all and don't want to because they think their job is to pray and learn, and yes, they do. The government pays them. So anyway, you can see how I feel about that. But yes, people had to have careers. They should still have careers, and I don't either, other than the rabbinate. So, it's all questionable, I guess.
The current number of those people who refuse to serve in the IDF for religious reasons that are of military age are none other than 66,000 of useless individuals. Useless to the IDF.
How do you really feel,
Keep your eyes open about that, because keep your eyes and ears open about that, because it may happen that the Knesset will funnel people into the military. They'll make a rule like that. They voted it down the last time, but they might do it. But let's just also be real, since I diverged, which is the people who study in yeshivot all the time don't have very many worldly skills. So you would have to train those people really hard in order to make them useful in a military type of situation. So it's not that easy a question. Now, going back to beer. So they say, as Rav recently began selling beer, it's become his favorite beverage to the extent that he uses it for kiddush. So that's that. Anybody have any comments about Rav and the beer? Anybody have any desire to have beer as your kiddush drink this coming week? At the end of Pesach, because beer is made with grain, at the end of Pesach, my father, alav shalom, would set up a big celebration for the synagogue, in which case they would bring a big, like one of those big wooden vats of draft beer and huge plates full of pasta and things like that. And that's how they would end Pesach. But they would also end Pesach with saying Havdalah, and what they put on the Havdalah plate to say Kiddush with was beer. So thank you for letting me honor my father for a minute. Okay, now we're going to get to, what time is it, please? 1:45. Okay, so let's see what we've got here. I want to just decide what I want to do, because we're going to run out of time.
have a beer instead.
Hold on. Just give me a second. I just want to decide. Okay. So let's go to the last page for a moment. And would somebody like to read from Rambam, from Maimonides? Oh, I'm going to do it if nobody wants to. Okay. Rosalie's going to take the top one, and Joette, you're going to take the next two.
Okay, thank you. The benefits of wine are many if it is taken, last page, folks, okay? The benefits of wine are many if it is taken in the proper amount, as it keeps the body in a healthy condition and cures many illnesses. But the knowledge of its consumption is hidden from the masses. What they want is to get drunk, and inebriety causes harm. The small amount that is useful must be taken after the food leaves the stomach. Young children should not come close to it because it hurts them and causes harm to their body and soul. The older a man is, the more beneficial the wine is for him. Old people need it most. Thank you. Maimonides.
Okay. So, what was Maimonides besides a Jewish scholar? A doctor. He was a doctor. So he's speaking from his doctor's perspective. But I want to ask a question here. Those of us who grew up in a Jewish home, how many of us were given sips of wine on Friday night or at the Seder? Right. So I would say that the vast majority of us lived in families where the parents hadn't really listened to Maimonides, because I know my parents handed me the little Manischewitz Kiddush cup, and I was very glad. So the question is, now why would he say that young kids shouldn't have it, and why would he say it that it's healthy and cures many, many illnesses? Now we have to take ourselves back in time, to live when Rambam lived in the Middle Ages. Why is he saying what he's saying? Because of the diseases that went around that killed people. So what is in these beverages that can help somebody? Alcohol. Right. So you have alcohol, and you also have vitamins and things like that didn't show up in a lot of the different kinds of things that they ate. So he saw it as a good thing. And why would he not want children to drink that wine? They might become addicted. They could get drunk easily. The alcohol content in wine, in the days in which we drink wine that's produced and in wineries, is less alcoholic content than what they used to have in wine back in the day, way back in the day.
They start then very early, like during the bris, they give it the baby.
Yeah, yep, they always have done that. Yeah, it's a good deterrent from paying attention to any other parts of your body. So, okay, yes.
It's sort of related, but we know that alcohol can become addictive, but also smoking and with the nicotine. So I guess we don't see anything there about smoking, but it's very related to the same thing about addiction. Did it have cigarettes in?
Yeah. Yeah, they're not. I was going to say, I don't think they're smokers back in those days. So, okay, so obviously too much alcohol is addictive, but that he's talking about it from the perspective, when he says the masses, you need to know something about Maimonides. Brilliant scholar. Very judgmental. Very, very judgmental. He had a different set of thoughts and affirmation of people who were scholars, and a much less positive view of people who were just amcha, just people. So it was one of his drawbacks. But he did a lot of good as well. Okay. Last two, I guess.
Do not take drugs because they demand periodic doses and your heart will crave them. You will also lose money. Even for medicinal purposes, do not take drugs if you can find a different medicine that will help.
Tell the years.
Samuel ben Meir, 1085 to 1158.
So just so that you know, I provided these for you so that you can see just how ahead of our time, of their time, our scholars were. I mean, these things come up and up and up. They are so aware of what's happening. So here you have this guy. We don't, Samuel ben Meir wrote a number of commentaries. Oh my gosh, there were a lot of them. The fruit of Gennesaret that we just talked about today, that was an edible drug. They had what's it called? Nuts, or some kind of nuts that were drugs, but also mushrooms. They ate those, maybe poppies. I mean, believe me, if you want to find drugs, you could find a whole bunch of them out there in nature. And so, yes. Last one, though, Joette. I don't know what time it'll be after that. But
There are 8 things that taken in large quantities are bad, but in small quantities are helpful. Travel, sex, wealth, work, wine, sleep, hot baths, and bloodletting.
We gave up on the last one, but we haven't given up on any of the others, so not bad. So this is I wanted this as like the Babylonian Talmud last commentary, because we looked at a lot of texts about overuse of things. But the rabbis really were very aware that life is to be lived in moderation. We do not, as Jews, have prohibitions on a lot of things that other people have prohibitions on, because we expect people to learn and to grow and to know what their own personal end lines are, like what we can deal with individually, and also communally, what's better for community. So I love this Babylonian Talmud thing. Any of these things that they mention can be addictive. They can all be addictive, but they're telling us, we're not trying to tell you what to do or how to live your life. You need to develop a maturity to know what you can handle and what is appropriate for you and what's appropriate for your family and the community in which you live.
Speaking of prohibitions, the prohibition changed a couple things. Number one, reason for prohibition was that alcoholism was so pervasive because it was the means to drink. Instead of drinking water, you drank liquor, and so it came in and we had prohibition, but it had an effect on the Jewish community. I love this anecdote. During prohibition, we couldn't get wine, and the Catholics couldn't get wine for their service. So what is the government going to do? They can't we have freedom of religion, so they compromised, and we got Manischewitz, sickeningly sweet wine that nobody would want to drink as an actual beverage. It was super sweet and low in alcohol, and used to be on the front of either Mogen David or Manischewitz. It said sacramental wine. And so it became the tradition because during Prohibition, there was no other wine, and that families, that's what we do Passover on, so that's why it became such an important thing to us.
So it's very interesting because people during the time of a prohibition, I was an American history major in college, and during the time of the prohibition, a lot of people registered themselves as Jews. So, because they'd rather have Manischewitz than nothing, and also because the authorities did not, if somebody made bathtub wine in the Jewish community, they wouldn't get arrested for it. So it was, but mostly Manischewitz, but there was that. So, I see you, Janice, just a minute. My father worked as a rabbi chaplain, not worked, he served as a rabbi chaplain at a jail in Northern California. And he would go and he would do Shabbat services, and there would be not a huge number of people. There weren't that many people who were incarcerated who were Jewish back in those days. And but when Pesach came, suddenly everybody was Jewish because they wanted to be able to go to the Seder. So that happened during the Prohibition as well. Janice? I don't know what.
Okay, this comes from a book I read many, many years ago. This comes from a book I read many, many years ago about the first wine in each country, and this one was about wine. And they were drinking wine. They give the children wine because the water was polluted. It was a safety measure to have everybody drinking wine, including the very young children. It's not that they were giving them drunk, it's that they were keeping them healthy.
Thank you. That's absolutely true. One more comment, Cecil?
Yes. Just a personal experience. When I was trying to get my father out of Cuba, I traveled to Mexico to try to obtain a visa from Cuba through Mexico to come to the United States. I was warned before I left not to drink the water in Mexico City because it's contaminated with a lot of bacteria, etc., etc. Well, I solved the problem. I never touched water. I drank nothing but tequila.
That's a cute ending. So in these texts that I gave you, there are 2 additional Talmud texts that we didn't get to. So you can either hand them back and say, I learned enough and that's fine, or you can hold on to the documents, or I can come to hope to come and teach you those and some other things another time, whatever you want. But we've reached the end of this session. Once again, thank you so much for having me here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
I love your sweatshirt. Where did you get it?
My daughter Shira and my daughter Eliza bought it for me. The Hanukkah. It's cute. That one of my daughter's friends from Beth Am makes these.
I'm sorry, I don't read
It says,
Hebrew.
Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. But then my children added my parents' names
Oh,
for
that's
memory.
wonderful.
On
So
my
sweet.
sweatshirt as well. So, yeah.
So I